some few years ago, I should have kept this article because it was a brilliant article. It was concerning the killers of Jamie Bulger, whatever his name was. This young, was it 2 or 3 year old, who was abducted in a shopping centre in Liverpool, tortured and killed on a railway track by some, was it 8 or 9 year old children? And the whole culture of England at the time, especially driven by the tabloid press, was wanting the blood of those 2 killers. Now, even though they were very, very young, they'd done a terrible, terrible thing to take the life of a 2-year-old, and it's not just one person's death, it's all the tears and the anxiety and the stress and the devastation of all of the people who knew that child, let alone the parents. But what I never knew at the time was pointed out in this article was that at about the same time a similar event happened in Norway, in the town of Trondheim, north of Oslo, where I think 2 boys had lured, I think, a girl into the snowfields and had similarly killed her. And the similarities between the crimes were very close. But what was very dissimilar was the way those 2 societies dealt with the problem. As many of you know, with the Jamie Bulger case, those 2 kids were put into some detention centre, and the tabloid press just wanted them to be really punished hard, and the parents were just waiting for them to be released so they could kill them. And even the public just did not want them to be released. I read in the newspapers there was some idea of sending them to Australia where they wouldn't be known, new identities, so they could live their life, and the British public saying, no, they don't deserve any freedom. That's what I read. With these other 2 kids, the following day after they were caught, they both went to school, accompanied by psychiatrists and social worker. They were not put into any punitive institution. Very, very soon, the mother and father of the child who died came to a closure, came to forgiveness, and moved on in their life, whereas the parents of Jamie Bulger had never moved on, as far as I know. And the whole town of Trondheim sort of came to a closure. They realised it's a terrible act, but the only way to move forward is not to wish harm on the killers. And so many years later, one of the killers of, I think it was a little girl in Trondheim, was perfectly well adjusted, having a successful life, completed the education, had really moved on, so did the family and the rest of the town. There's one of the killers still had social problems and some psychological problems, but nowhere near like the pain which was spread around England because of the Jamie Bulger case. To see those 2 separate accounts of a similar tragedy, one where there were many victims and their victimhood was, I dare to say, cherished and attached to and made much of, and the other one where rehabilitation was the main aim and goal. To see the effects of those 2 cases, I sure wish I lived in Norway than in England. That was the way forward, the way that everyone got healed, the way there was less pain, less suffering. So, when we are not happy, when we are suffering, when we are not free, why is it? It is because we don't know how to move on from the pains and difficulties and stresses of life. Now these are big pains, big problems, big sufferings. You probably haven't had to experience that degree of suffering. But if those people can move on and find freedom, why can't we? One of the great causes for happiness is the ability to forgive.